Ever since the changes to the Sorcerer's Twin Spell Metamagic option were revealed during the playtest, it's been a topic that's been discussed a lot and has been on the controversial side of changes that the design team made for the 2024 Player's Handbook. Twin Spell has been a much loved mechanic for Sorcerer players over the last decade, not only because of how incredibly powerful it was, but also because it truly oozed flavor and allowed the Sorcerer to do things with spells that felt truly unique to the class, along with their other metamagic options too. But I mean, it didn't hurt that it also had the potential to be incredibly powerful too. So it wasn't really with that much of a surprise that the design team had it in their sights to update the ability in an effort to restrain its power and make it feel a little bit less like of a default choice for many players. So let's talk about Twin Spell. At this point, we're only a few days away from the official release of the 2024 Player's Handbook, and it doesn't look like I'm going to quite reach that goal of 10k by then. I do want to give a massive thank you to everyone who helped me get so close. I do truly appreciate it. That said, the grind is still very much on as I am still so close to hitting that 10k milestone, and I am planning a super fun celebration event with some friends that you might know. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to help me reach that 10k milestone, and keep an eye out for some announcements in the coming weeks. Thank you as always to all of my members, especially those in the champion tier, Julian, Karel, and Finiki. I could not do this without you guys. If you'd like to help out and become a member to the channel as well, click on the join button and see what benefits you can get. Thank you so much. Just so everyone is on the same page, we are quickly going to go over the 2014 version. It reads, Twin Spell. When you cast a spell that targets only one creature and doesn't have a range of self, you can spend a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level to target a second creature in range with the same spell. 1 sorcery point if the spell is a cantrip. To be eligible, a spell must be incapable of targeting more than one creature at the spell's current level. For example, Magic Missile and Scorching Ray aren't eligible, but Ray of Frost and Chromatic Orb are. It's worth noting that the second paragraph about how the spell must be incapable of targeting more than one creature at its current level was not actually part of the original printing of the ability, but instead came in an errata after the original publication to provide clarity and ensure it was being used as intended. The 2014 version of Twin Spell offered both incredibly powerful as well as versatile options for its use, sometimes both. Common uses included Twinning Haste, Banishment, Polymorph, Dissonant Whispers, and honestly so many more. It almost matters less what people commonly used with it, so much as it matters that it offered so much freedom and flexibility in its use in such a wide variety of situations. Twinning Revivify or Invisibility or even Disintegrate, as expensive as it might have been, could all be seen as perfectly valid and situational uses of the ability, and I think that was a big part of its appeal. It was just so good in so many situations. Funnily enough though, this is also what likely led to the change. Ubiquity was often the target in the 2024 Player's Handbook. If there was an option that was basically always being picked, the designers wanted to find a way to make it be less picked. See Divine Smite and Hunter's Mark. Oh wait, sorry, they actually built an entire class around that one. I digress. Anyway, yeah, Ubiquity. Twin Spell was almost always chosen by any sorcerer, except you. I know you didn't, but in any case, because it was so commonly chosen, the decision was ultimately made to send it to the big feature field in the sky and figure out something else. In UA5, we got kind of a weird version of it, which allowed you, if you cast the spell on a previous turn, to spend a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level to cast it again on this turn, though it was limited to spells leveled 1 through 5. At its most basic level, this is largely the same effect as the 2014 Twin Spell. You're still getting the effect of the spell twice, it's just delayed by a turn. But because you're casting it again and not just doubling the effect, it doesn't really work with concentration spells anymore. It also had a narrow band of spell levels that it worked with, but on the flip side, it didn't have the restriction of needing to only be able to target one creature. But you also had to know that you'd want to be casting the same spell twice in a row. Like I said, it was kind of a strange implementation of the concept. I can see what they were trying to accomplish, but it definitely didn't execute on it, for me at least. So I was happy to see that they went back to the drawing board and tried again. In UA7, we again saw Twin Spell return with a new version, and it essentially matches what's in the printed version of the 2024 PHB, so I'll just read it from there. The 2024 version of it reads as follows. Twin Spell, cost 1 sorcery point. When you cast a spell, such as Charm Person, that can be cast with a higher level spell slot to target an additional creature, you can spend 1 sorcery point to increase the spell's effective level by 1. This feels like a pretty significant change, but before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, there's one common complaint I've seen come up countless times that I want to take a minute to address. Generally speaking, it seems most people are okay with the new version of Twin Spell. I ran a poll on my channel, and at the time of writing, about 75% of the roughly 1,000 votes either like it or at least aren't bothered by it. However, within the comments of that poll and on countless other Reddit posts and Discord servers and YouTube videos, you'll see the sentiment echoed that the feature's okay, I just hate that it doesn't feel like you're twinning anything, or you're not twinning anymore, so they should have just changed the name. And my question to that is, aren't you? What 2024 Twin Spell does is fundamentally the same as what its 2014 predecessor did. As far as spells on the sorcerer's list go, all but one that is capable of being used with the ability now was also eligible to be used with it in 2014. Let's use an example to provide some more clarity. Banishment. This spell met all the requirements for 2014 Twin Spell and was often a great use of it in combat as well. Twinning it functionally allows you to get the effect of the spell on a second creature without needing to expend a second spell slot, and while not creating some weird interaction where you're holding concentration twice. All for the cost of 4 sorcery points. Now let's look at 2024. Banishment. This spell still meets all the requirements for twinning in 2024 and is still sure to be a great use in combat. Twinning it functionally allows you to get the effect of the spell on a second creature without needing to expend a second spell slot, all while not creating some weird interaction where you're holding concentration twice, all for the cost of 1 sorcery point. So if it felt like twinning in 2014, why doesn't it in 2024? To quote Pam Beasley, it's the same picture.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. They're the same picture.
Now yes, I know that there's a lot more to it and we will get to all of it, but I just wanted to underscore that at its most basic level, the two versions of this ability fundamentally do the exact same thing. They just go about it in slightly different ways. The primary function of Twin Spell both was and is to target an additional creature without spending extra spell slots. That's still how it works, it's just significantly more limited in the pool of spells that you can select from, but comes with the perk of being much less expensive to use. Anyway, in regard to whether or not it feels like twinning, take it or leave it. That's a personal preference, it's up to you to decide. I think it does, but you might not, and that's fine. Something I mentioned earlier is that the list of spells that you can use Twin Spell with is now significantly lower than it was before. I took a look through the 2024 Player's Handbook and identified every spell that would have worked with Twin Spell if they hadn't changed it. Again, this is exclusively looking at the 2024 PHB. There are a total of 116 spells that would have worked with the old version of Twin Spell. There's 391 spells in the book. That's almost a third of them. That is wild. Now yes, I should mention that this does include both spells from the Sorcerer's list as well as those on other class lists, some of which would require crazy amounts of multiclassing to acquire, but I just wanted to get a total count to get an apples to apples comparison. If you're curious, there's 54 Sorcerer spells that would have worked, out of Sorcerer's 150. And a quick sidebar, D&D Beyond, please don't make us select the 2024 D&D free rules as well as the Player's Handbook to be able to see all the spells that are also just in the Player's Handbook. We should be able to see them by just selecting the 2024 PHB. Thanks. Compare that to the eligible spells for the new version of Twin Spell. Again, these are spells exclusively in the 2024 PHB and includes both Sorcerer and non-Sorcerer spells. 25 spells. That's it. 8 of which aren't even on the Sorcerer's list. This represents such a stark contrast between the capability of the old and new version of Twin Spell. But there are a few considerations worth discussing, so let's do that. First is the underlying design of the feature itself. We already discussed how it is functionally doing the same thing that it used to. The only difference is the requirement of the spell needing to be able to be upcast to target additional creatures to be able to benefit from it is heavily restricting. And we can clearly see that in the comparison of these two lists. It's clear to me that the design intent was to make it so that the only spells you're now able to simultaneously cast or twin are those that the game was designed to be able to support if they were being cast simultaneously. Being able to twin Disintegrate, as expensive as it might have been, represents a massive damage output. It's like 150 average damage split across 2 targets. Twinning Haste, while yes, it had the downside of 2 creatures suffering the lethargy effect when the spell ends, but that's something that was built into Haste, not Twin Spell. But it also represented outlandish gains in action economy for only a potential downside. Twinning Revivify, however circumstantial, also allows you to bypass a costly material component and potentially mitigate a combat threat. Here's the thing though, all of these uses of Twin Spell are cool. They are rad as hell, and they let the player essentially break the game and do some epic things that shouldn't have been possible without it, and feel like a total baller for it too. And for that, I loved what the feature brought to the game. The downside though, is that just because of how good it was in so many situations, like I mentioned earlier, you almost felt obligated to take it as one of your Metamagic options because it was just so damn good. What the new version of Twin Spell does is allow you to still break the rules of the game, but in a much more controlled way. The bottom line is that as awesome as Twinning Haste is, the game wasn't designed with that in mind. Twinning something like Banishment though, they conceived as a possibility and even allowed a mechanic to enable it through upcasting. What all this means is that the new version of the feature still lets you break the rules. You can effectively cast 5th level Banishment a few levels before you would have access to 5th level spells, which is still quite cool and powerful, and it lets you do it for way fewer resources than before. Doing it this way allows the design team to control the potential wombo combos and also allows them to open up design space for spells a little bit more, as they don't necessarily need to be as concerned about whether or not giving a sorcerer another great twinning target is going to break the game or not. This leads us quite nicely into the other consideration, which is damage through twinning. If you look at the list of spells eligible to be used with Twin Spell now, you'll see that it is noticeably devoid of damage dealing spells. In fact, there are exactly 2 spells that can deal damage with it, one of which, Grasping Vine, isn't even on the sorcerer's list. So the only damage dealing spell that leaves then is Chain Lightning, which is a 6th level spell and, as a result, requires an at least 11th level character to use it. So let's be real, that's probably not happening all that often. And even then, whether it works or not is still kind of at least somewhat questionable to me. I think it probably does though. In large part, this adjustment to the feature essentially removes damage from the scope of its capability. It is very clear that the intent of Twin Spell in 2024 is to be used much more as a utility ability rather than one to deal or to allow to be dealt exceptional amounts of damage. I am okay with this. To be clear, just because it isn't effective at dealing damage anymore doesn't mean that it isn't good when it's used during combat. Banishment was and still is an excellent use. Preemptively twinning freedom of movement can also be incredibly clutch if you know what type of encounter you're getting yourself into. Hold Monster or Hold Person are both excellent choices. Even outside of combat, Etherealness, Fly, Gaseous Form can all be incredibly useful spells, and especially so when twinned. I think that's kind of where the magic of the feature lies now. It lets you think about when to use it and how you want to use it. This is especially true considering the steep discount you now get on it when twinning as compared to when you did in 2014. Because it now always costs 1 sorcery point rather than an amount equal to the spell's level, you can get so much more mileage out of this ability. You won't necessarily feel like you need to save them for a twin haste or something like that, and you can feel much more free to use it outside of combat scenarios too. But also, then there's the combination with the new 1st level feature Innate Sorcery, which increases your spell save DC by 1. This now means that those utility spells like Banishment or Blindness Deafness or Hold Monster are also more likely to be successful when cast, incentivizing you to use them even more. Oh, and Sorcerous Restoration, letting you regenerate more sorcery points on a short rest, is yet another way to encourage use of the ability rather than just hoarding them. There are sure to be a lot of people who are very upset about this change and are just going to call it a massive nerf or something along those lines. And sure, maybe it is. The pool of spells that you can use it with has gotten much smaller, we've established that. But if all you were casting with it was Banishment or something like that anyway, then this is a massive buff since it costs 25% of what it used to. The compulsion many have to exclusively categorize things as nerfs or buffs is just unhelpful when it comes to having meaningful discussions about design and changes to the game overall. Sometimes things are just different or side grades where they might be worse in some situations but better in others, and that's okay. One of the knock-on effects of Twin Spell being changed in the way that it was is that it will also likely allow room for other metamagic options to shine, which is especially important since so many of them have been changed and made so much stronger than their 2014 predecessors. Careful Spell, despite now costing the same as it used to, also effectively provides the benefit of the evasion feature to your allies, allowing them to take no damage on their guaranteed successful save. That's amazing and creates so many more cases for this to be used with AoE damage dealing spells. Extended Spell still costs 1 sorcery point, but now also provides advantage on any concentration checks you make when you extend a spell that requires concentration. Heightened Spell went down from 3 sorcery points to 2, and makes it so the target has disadvantage on all saves against a spell, not just the first one. Subtle Spell now also works with material components except for those that consume the component or have a cost specified, and Seeking Spell now costs 1 sorcery point instead of 2. What I'm getting at is that even if you consider the 2024 version of Twin Spell to be a nerf, the reality is that nearly all of the other metamagic options for the sorcerer have been greatly improved, so the class and what it can do with metamagic is, overall, much more powerful than what it could do before, and encourages players to want to do something else with the feature rather than just twin everything all day. Twin Spell is not gutted. It still retains the core of what it used to do, and in my opinion, is still a very valid choice. The difference is that now it feels like an equally valid choice among all other choices that players have with the class. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Let me know what you think about the new version of Twin Spell in the comments below. Consider subscribing to help me reach that goal of 10,000 subscribers. Check out some of my other D&D videos, but otherwise, take care.